He looked his wife in the eyes and ordered security to throw her out of the hotel. But seconds later, one sentence would destroy everything he thought he knew. Because the woman he humiliated owned the entire $50 million hotel.
Stop! The day David Monroe was dragged out of the hotel by security wasn't the day his marriage ended. It was the day he discovered that love could survive lies, but respect never could. Sometimes people don't betray you because you're weak. Sometimes they betray you because they believe you'll never become strong enough to leave. And David had spent 7 years proving exactly that. If you've ever wondered how quickly success can change the way people look at you, stay with me. This isn't just a story about wealth. It's about pride, hidden identities, and the painful cost of judging someone before knowing the whole truth. Every morning at exactly 5:15, David Monroe tied the same worn leather boots, poured a cup of black coffee, kissed his wife softly on the forehead, and drove across Atlanta while the city was still wrapped in darkness. He loved mornings. They were honest. No traffic, no noise, no pretending. For 12 years, David had worked as a commercial refrigeration technician. He repaired industrial cooling systems inside restaurants, grocery stores, hospitals, and luxury hotels. The work was difficult, sometimes filthy, often dangerous, but David carried himself with quiet dignity. He believed that if a person's work fed families and kept businesses alive, then no job deserved shame. His father had taught him that. Son, Charles, Monroe used to say, while repairing broken air conditioners in their small garage, a man isn't measured by the suit he wears. He's measured by the promises he keeps. David never forgot those words. Unfortunately, his wife had. Vanessa Monroe wasn't always obsessed with status. When they met in college, she admired David because he was dependable. While other men skipped classes, David worked evenings fixing restaurant freezers to pay tuition. When other boyfriends bought expensive gifts with borrowed money, David cooked dinner himself. He remembered birthdays. He remembered anniversaries. He remembered dreams. Vanessa once told her friends, "I don't need a millionaire. I just need a man who'll never let me face life alone." Back then, she meant it, or at least David believed she did. People change slowly, so slowly that you rarely notice until one day the stranger sitting across the dinner table has your spouse's face. It started after Vanessa accepted a marketing position with Monarch Hospitality Group. The company owned luxury hotels throughout the Southeast, elegant buildings, celebrity events, corporate galas, executives who wore watches worth more than David's pickup truck. Vanessa loved the environment. She loved the designer clothes. She loved networking with wealthy investors. She loved introducing herself as someone in hospitality management. What she stopped loving was introducing David. At company parties, she always had an excuse. David's working. David's on call. David couldn't make it. The truth? The day Alicia Brooks was dragged toward the revolving doors of the Grand Monarch Hotel, she wasn't crying because strangers were watching. She was crying because the man ordering security to remove her was her own husband. What nobody in that glittering marble lobby knew was that the elegant hotel surrounding them, the crystal chandeliers, the gold-trimmed columns, the presidential suites upstairs, every brick, every employee, every luxury car parked outside belonged to the quiet woman being forced into the street. Not on paper anyone could easily find, not publicly, and certainly not in the mind of the husband who had spent the last 3 years believing she was just another office worker. Sometimes people don't lose everything because they're poor. Sometimes they lose everything because they underestimate the one person who never needed them in the first place. If you've ever watched someone judge another person by appearances, then you already know this story. Won't end the way anyone inside that hotel expected. Take a moment and tell me where you're watching from. I always enjoy seeing how far these stories travel. And if stories about pride, hidden truths, and second chances are your kind of stories, you're in the right place. Every weekday at exactly 6:15 a.m., Alicia Brooks stopped at the same small coffee stand 2 blocks from the Grand Monarch Hotel. Mr. Lewis, the elderly owner, already knew her order. Medium coffee. 1 packet of brown sugar. No lid. She always smiled. Morning, Mr. Lewis. He smiled back. Big day today? She laughed softly. When isn't it? She never looked rich. Her clothes were tasteful but simple. No designer logos. No expensive jewelry except for one delicate gold bracelet that had belonged to her late grandmother. To everyone passing by, she looked like another professional heading into downtown, Atlanta's business district, exactly how she wanted it. Very few people knew that Alicia had inherited Monarch Hospitality Group from her grandmother, Eleanor Brooks, nearly 6 years earlier. Even fewer knew Eleanor had deliberately hidden Alicia's ownership behind a family trust until she felt her granddaughter had developed enough wisdom to lead without arrogance. Eleanor often said, "Money reveals character, but anonymity protects it." Those words stayed with Alicia long after her grandmother passed away. Instead of walking into the hotel through the executive entrance, Alicia usually entered through a staff hallway every Tuesday. She liked speaking directly with housekeepers, cooks, receptionists, engineers, and maintenance workers before executive meetings. She believed people cleaned better when they felt respected. She believed receptionists noticed problems before managers did. She believed janitors heard conversations executives never would. It was an unusual leadership style, but it worked. Employee satisfaction was among the highest in the state. The day Alicia Brooks was dragged toward the revolving doors of the Grand Monarch Hotel, she wasn't crying because strangers were watching. She was crying because the man ordering security to remove her was her own husband. What nobody in that glittering marble lobby knew was that the elegant hotel surrounding them, the crystal chandeliers, the gold-trimmed columns, the presidential suites upstairs, every brick, every employee, every luxury car parked outside belonged to the quiet woman being forced into the street. Not on paper anyone could easily find. Not publicly, and certainly not in the mind of the husband who had spent the last 3 years believing she was just another office worker. Sometimes people don't lose everything because they're poor. Sometimes they lose everything because they underestimate the one person who never needed them in the first place. If you've ever watched someone judge another person by appearances, then you already know this story. Won't end the way anyone inside that hotel expected. Take a moment and tell me where you're watching from. I always enjoy seeing how far these stories travel. And if stories about pride, hidden truths, and second chances are your kind of stories, you're in the right place. Every weekday at exactly 6:15 a.m., Alicia Brooks stopped at the same small coffee stand 2 blocks from the Grand Monarch Hotel. Mr. Lewis, the elderly owner, already knew her order. Medium coffee, 1 packet of brown sugar, no lid. She always smiled. Morning, Mr. Lewis. He smiled back. Big day today? She laughed softly. When isn't it? She never looked rich. Her clothes were tasteful but simple. No designer logos. No expensive jewelry except for one delicate gold bracelet that had belonged to her late grandmother. To everyone passing by, she looked like another professional heading into downtown, Atlanta's business district, exactly how she wanted it. Very few people knew that Alicia had inherited Monarch Hospitality Group from her grandmother, Eleanor Brooks, nearly 6 years earlier. Even fewer knew Eleanor had deliberately hidden Alicia's ownership behind a family trust until she felt her granddaughter had developed enough wisdom to lead without arrogance. Eleanor often said, "Money reveals character, but anonymity protects it." Those words stayed with Alicia long after her grandmother passed away. Instead of walking into the hotel through the executive entrance, Alicia usually entered through a staff hallway every Tuesday. She liked speaking directly with housekeepers, cooks, receptionists, engineers, and maintenance workers before executive meetings. She believed people cleaned better when they felt respected. She believed receptionists noticed problems before managers did. She believed janitors heard conversations executives never would. It was an unusual leadership style, but it worked. Employee satisfaction was among the highest in the state. As Marcus grew more successful, something else quietly grew alongside his confidence. impatience. He began criticizing Alicia more often. You really should dress better. You don't understand executive culture. You need to think bigger. You embarrass me at networking events. At first, Alicia believed the stress of work was changing him. Then she noticed something more troubling. He had started measuring people's worth by their income. Restaurant servers became invisible. Valets barely deserved eye contact. Housekeepers were spoken to as though they were furniture. Every time she corrected him privately, he apologized. But the behavior returned. Again and again. One rainy Thursday evening, Alicia visited one of the Grand Monarch's restaurants alone. Not as the owner, as an ordinary guest. She wanted to observe service naturally. Halfway through dinner, she heard a familiar voice. Marcus. He hadn't seen her. He sat with several executives discussing upcoming hotel contracts. One man asked, "Have you ever met ownership?" Marcus laughed confidently. "Not yet. But whoever they are, they probably inherited everything." The table laughed. Marcus continued, "People born rich don't understand hard work." Alicia lowered her eyes toward her soup. For the first time in their marriage, his words hurt. Not because they insulted her, because they insulted someone who had spent decades building opportunities for thousands of families. Her grandmother. That night she almost revealed everything. Almost. Instead, she asked one question. If someone you loved turned out to be far wealthier than you imagined, would it change how you treated them? Marcus answered without hesitation. Of course not. She searched his face. You promise? I married you, not your bank account. She nodded slowly. I hope that's true. Weeks passed. Then came the annual Monarch Charity Gala, the biggest event of the year. Hundreds of executives, politicians, celebrities, philanthropists, media. Marcus's company had won the contract to organize the evening. He considered it the biggest opportunity of his career. For 2 months he barely slept. Everything had to be perfect. He repeatedly warned Alicia not to interfere. You wouldn't enjoy it. I'm sure I'd be fine. It's invitation only. I understand. You'll just be bored. She smiled gently. I'll stay out of your way. Marcus had no idea. Alicia had personally approved every detail of the gala weeks earlier. She simply chose not to tell him. The morning of the event, Alicia received a phone call from Harold Simmons, the hotel's 72-year-old chairman, one of the few people who knew the complete truth. Good morning, Ms. Brooks. Morning, Harold. We've arranged your arrival. Actually, she paused. I'd rather enter through the lobby today. There was silence. You expect complications? She looked through her office window. I think today someone is going to show me exactly who they are. Harold sighed. I don't like the sound of that. Neither do I. That evening, the Grand Monarch sparkled brighter than ever. Luxury cars lined the entrance. Photographers captured arriving guests. Crystal lights reflected across polished marble floors. Staff moved with perfect precision. Marcus stood near the entrance wearing a navy blue tailored suit. An earpiece connected him to the event team. He looked every bit the confident executive he had dreamed of becoming. Everything was running perfectly, until he noticed Alicia walking toward the entrance. She wore an elegant cream-colored suit. Simple, classy, no flashy jewelry, no dramatic makeup, just effortless confidence. Marcus hurried toward her, lowering his voice. What are you doing here? She smiled. I came for the gala. I told you this event isn't for guests without invitations. I have one. Let me see. She calmly reached into her purse. Before she could remove the envelope, Marcus interrupted. I don't have time for this. I'm serious. So am I. Several executives nearby had started watching. Marcus's face tightened. You are embarrassing me. I'm only trying to come inside. You don't belong here. Those 4 words echoed louder than either of them expected. Alicia blinked. I'm your wife. Exactly. So please stop making this harder. He turned toward 2 hotel security officers. Gentlemen, the larger guard stepped forward. Yes, sir? Marcus pointed directly at Alicia. This woman is trying to enter without authorization. Alicia stared at him in disbelief. Marcus, I've asked you politely. Escort her outside. The first guard hesitated. The second looked uncertain. "Sir, are you sure?" Marcus's voice became sharper. "Did I stutter?" Around them, conversation slowed. Guests turned to watch. One guard gently reached for Alicia's arm. "I'm sorry, ma'am." She looked at him calmly. "You don't need to apologize." Then she turned back toward her husband. There was no anger in her eyes anymore, only disappointment. "So," she whispered, "this is who you've become?" Marcus folded his arms. "I won't let anyone ruin tonight." The guard slowly guided Alicia toward the revolving doors. Across the lobby, an elderly man stepped out of a private elevator. Chairman Harold Simmons. He froze the instant he saw security escorting Alicia toward the exit. His face drained of color. Then he looked directly at Marcus. And in a voice loud enough for half the lobby to hear, he shouted, "What on earth do you think you're doing to the owner of this hotel?" That single sentence froze the entire lobby. "What on earth do you think you're doing to the owner of this hotel?" For a heartbeat, nobody moved. The soft music from the ballroom continued in the background, but every conversation in the marble lobby came to an abrupt stop. Marcus stared at Harold Simmons as if he'd spoken another language. "The owner?" Harold hurried across the polished floor, his normally calm expression replaced with genuine alarm. He stopped in front of Alicia. "Ms. Brooks, are you all right?" Instead of answering immediately, Alicia gently removed the security guard's hand from her arm. She smiled kindly at the embarrassed man. "You were only following instructions." The guard swallowed hard. I'm so sorry." "You have nothing to apologize for." She looked at both officers. "You acted professionally." Their shoulders relaxed, but the shame on Marcus's face was only beginning. One executive whispered to another, "Did he just say owner? I thought ownership was a family trust." "It is." "So who is she?" Harold turned toward the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice carried naturally through the lobby, "allow me to introduce Ms. Alicia Brooks, the majority owner and chairwoman of Monarch Hospitality Group." Silence, complete silence, the same executives who had ignored. Alicia, seconds earlier, suddenly looked as though the ground had disappeared beneath them. Marcus blinked repeatedly. "No." Harold frowned. "No?" Marcus shook his head. "There has to be some mistake." Harold answered calmly, "There isn't." Marcus looked at Alicia. "You never told me." She met his eyes without anger. "You never asked who I was. You only asked what I earned." The realization struck Marcus in painful waves. The old SUV she refused to replace, the anonymous donations, the way employees seemed unusually comfortable around her, the stories she told about leadership, the confidence she carried without needing attention, the countless times she had tried to show him that character mattered more than status. He had mistaken humility for mediocrity. One of the hotel managers rushed downstairs. "Ms. Brooks, I'm terribly sorry." Alicia smiled. "There's nothing for you to apologize for." Another executive approached nervously. "We've been looking forward to your keynote speech." Marcus stared. "Keynote speech?" Harold nodded. "Every year. She gives it anonymously to senior leadership." Marcus felt dizzy. His wife wasn't attending the gala. She was the reason it existed. News spread through the ballroom in minutes. Guests quietly gathered near the lobby. Whispers filled the room. "That's Alicia Brooks? I've heard she personally pays employees emergency medical bills. She funded scholarships for hospitality students. She never takes credit. I've never even seen a photograph of her." Marcus suddenly remembered every joke he'd made about her driving an old SUV, every complaint about her simple clothes, every time he'd called her unambitious. Each memory landed like a stone. Alicia finally turned toward him. "You once told me rich people don't understand hard work." Marcus lowered his head. "I remember. My grandmother cleaned hotel rooms before she ever owned one." Harold smiled softly. "She never forgot." Alicia continued. "I kept my identity private because I wanted people to reveal themselves honestly." She paused. "I never imagined my own husband would reveal the most." Marcus took one hesitant step forward. "I'm sorry." She didn't answer. "I'm so sorry." "Still nothing. I was arrogant." I judged people. I judged you. The words echoed through the lobby. No cameras flashed, no dramatic music played, just uncomfortable silence. Because everyone recognized something difficult. Real apologies aren't performed. They're witnessed. Harold quietly asked, Ms. Brooks, would you like us to remove Mr. Reed from tonight's event? Every eye turned toward Alicia. She could end Marcus's career with one sentence. Instead, she surprised everyone. No. Harold looked confused. No? He stays. Marcus looked up. You mean that? She nodded. I've spent years believing leadership is tested, most when we have power over someone. She looked directly at Marcus. If I humiliate you now, I become the very thing I've always tried not to be. Several employees exchanged glances. That single decision taught them more about leadership than any seminar ever had. The gala proceeded. Alicia entered through the same doors she'd nearly been forced, out of only minutes earlier. This time, every employee stood a little straighter. Not because she demanded respect, because she had earned it. When she stepped onto the stage, the audience rose in a standing ovation. It lasted nearly a full minute. Marcus remained seated at first, not out of pride, out of shame. Then slowly, he stood too. Alicia's speech wasn't about wealth. It wasn't about success. It wasn't even about what had happened in the lobby. Instead, she spoke about dignity. When people believe no one important is watching, they reveal who they really are. The greatest mistake leaders make is assuming power comes from being above others. She smiled. The truth is, real power is measured by how you treat the person who cannot benefit you. Many people applauded. Marcus couldn't. His eyes filled with tears, because he realized every word was meant for him. Over the following weeks, Marcus resigned from his position, not because Alicia demanded it, because he no longer trusted the person he had become. He enrolled in leadership and ethics programs. He volunteered with organizations that trained young professionals from disadvantaged communities. He spent weekends serving meals at shelters, often anonymously. Not for publicity, for perspective. The change was slow, painfully slow, but genuine. Months later, Marcus visited Mr. Lewis's coffee stand. The elderly owner smiled. The usual? Marcus nodded. He noticed Alicia already standing there with her familiar cup. She looked up. Good morning. He smiled nervously. Morning. They talked for nearly an hour. Not about money, not about hotels, not about the gala. They talked about forgiveness, responsibility, and the long road between saying, I'm sorry, and becoming someone worthy of being forgiven. Their marriage didn't magically return to what it once was. Trust rarely does. It had to be rebuilt one honest conversation, one humble action, and one difficult day at a time. Whether they would spend the rest of their lives together wasn't determined by one apology. It was determined by hundreds of small choices afterward. Because love can survive hardship. Sometimes it can even survive betrayal. But it can never survive pride unless pride is replaced by humility. A year later, the Grand Monarch Hotel unveiled a new employee development center. There was no giant portrait of Alicia in the lobby. No statue. No plaque celebrating her generosity. Only a small inscription near the entrance that read, Character is revealed not when others know your name, but when they don't. Guests walked past it every day. Most never stopped to read it. But those who did often paused for a moment, reflecting on its meaning. Because the greatest lesson wasn't that Alicia secretly owned a $50 million hotel. It was that true greatness doesn't need recognition to exist. It quietly reveals itself through kindness, humility, and the way we treat people when we believe they have nothing to offer us. If this story made you think differently about appearances, success, or the way we treat others, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Sometimes the most valuable thing we inherit isn't wealth. It's the wisdom to recognize the value in every person before the truth is revealed.